Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't be that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 0 years of law enforcement analysis experience. But wait, she does play an analyst at work. She is a certified SQL developer. She holds 2 certifications with Cellbrite. She's a member of both IALEA and IACA. She's a task force officer with the ATF. She is a police detective in the gang division. Please welcome Brittany Mason. Brittany, how are we doing?
Doing all right. What an introduction. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot going on there. It's right.
Seems a little chaotic. Just listen to you say it out loud.
Yeah. Well, I had to get over the fact that you are not an analyst, but you do analyst work. And so I'm curious to get your perspective and your story. So let's get started here. How did you discover the law enforcement analysis profession?
I kind of think that it discovered me, to be honest with you, kind of based off of my intro. Maybe that would be not too surprising, but getting into law enforcement and then just naturally, I think, developing into an investigator, how to work cases, and then having investigators look at me and say, you're doing this in an incredible, like, you're being very analytical right now. Like, you're really, you're going too detailed. I was like, is that a thing? That's too detailed is a bad thing? But it was just naturally kind of how I looked at cases and evidence and information, if you will, like just gathering up as much as I possibly could and then seeing what blues were going to match the other blues and what yellows match the other yellows and so on and so forth. So I just got told that multiple times. And then I started to realize the tools that I was more geared towards software wise. And then, of course, the data I was geared towards. Everyone was like, well, that's what analysts do. I'm like, well, why is that different? Because we need this information, right? This information is helping us solve our cases. So I never really I thought the lines were pretty blurred as far as where an analyst, an intel analyst, and an investigator are concerned. It seems like the jobs are more similar than they are different in my perspective. So it discovered me just by how I guess my brain works in its weird way. Weird or incredible, I guess, because analysts are awesome, right? So that's kind of how it came upon me. And then training and realizing that I just really loved all of the nuts and bolts of how the profession and the industry looks at problems and problem solving with hard facts and hard data and real numbers, not like interpreted information or things of that sort. So
yeah. It is interesting how you put it, and you have a particular perspective on this. As an investigator or detective, you're trying to build your case, and you're building your case with a whole host of different types of information and data. And so it is interesting that there's this like line that maybe it seems like maybe some investigators and detectives won't cross. I'm like, hey, I'm not doing that. That's analyst work over there. I'm not crossing that line.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
You got your undergrad at the University of Houston.
I did.
It was in forensic psychology. So at that time at an undergrad, did you have this desire to become an officer, or did that come later?
I did. I was actually working part-time at the police department as a civilian while I was in college. And I come from a family of law enforcement, so I was always around it. And it seemed like a big family, and just the extended family I got with my father being in law enforcement. And so it was kind of naturally, I was progressing to say, I want to get my degree, but then I do want to go into this profession of, fighting crime, if you will, as cheesy as that may sound, helping people really more than anything, and making a difference in some way, shape, or form while I'm on the earth, So I was always gearing up to go back and to do that.
You describe yourself as a techie, so I'm curious, is your dad a techie?
No, not at all. He actually still calls me to this day with any of his IT questions, or the computer's making a funny noise, or what do I do with this? And I always tell him, have you tried turning it off and back on again? And then we go from there. So he is not techie.
Yeah, because I could see him. Obviously, he's proud of you, but he's proud that you took on the law enforcement profession. But at the same time, there's that dark side of the moon that he just doesn't understand.
Yes, he says it all the time. We were very different cops, is what he says.
Oh.
Promoted and went the route of administration where he could try to make changes and differences from that space. And then I went the investigative route in what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And he just tells me, I don't understand everything, but I'm just so impressed with it. So he's very proud, but he doesn't get all of it for sure.
Yeah. So then when do you think you became a techie? Was that at a young age or was it not until adulthood?
I think that at a young age, I mean, me and my brother grew up, we're 14 months apart, and we were basically each other's best friends growing up. So, I mean,
Mm.
and we were always every video game system from Nintendo to Sega to Super Nintendo to N64 and so on. And then we got our first Packard Bell, which was like the biggest thing in the world, right? And we would have a timer where we got to like play Doom for 20 minutes a piece each night, and it was like the best, right? And so I think from then on, I did some web development classes in high school and then going
Mm.
forward, but I knew I was going to be going to the police department once I'd got to college. So I just stayed that route, never really understanding how like my hobby techie love side would come into contact with my career in that way. But it seemed to have worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
then starting as an officer, how did that technical mind or that desire for data impact you as a patrol officer?
As a as a patrol officer, I think more than anything, and I don't know if I can say this or I should say this, but more than anything, it was just seeing how siloed and separate all of our systems were and how foolishly we were having to do so many of the same thing in different platforms over and over again. And I'm like, if somebody had the right mind, they'd go in and they'd just make this one form and it would populate and all of the just like those kind of things
Hmm.
that you're thinking we could make this more efficient, but who was I to say anything like that at the time? And then that kind of just evolved into more targeted policing where it really played or started to play a role when I started actually like looking into, because when you're a patrol in the very beginning and you're running calls, you really aren't investigating, if you will. But once you get a little bit more time under your belt and you start looking at a case and you want to find the person who stole this elderly woman's purse out from under her and you start digging, that's where I think the techie stuff really started coming in. And I started realizing, okay, I can leverage this. My ability to just be on the internet all the time and know how data works might come in handy. So yeah, that's when I think it really started to blend and see what I could leverage.
Going into the detective role and getting an understanding of all the different data sets that you have access to. Certainly, are you self-taught in terms of like just accessing all of that, or did the police department do a pretty good job of training you?
Is this a trick question?
No.
Without me saying anything, no, I self-taught and internet taught. The department did not base. I did some training initially, and they had mentioned I'd always played around with different like coding languages and had a general idea of this, how things were structured and different ways that you could work things outside of the realm of like the police department. And then I had heard somebody mention that all of our data was all being stored and housed, and it's all obviously most people house their data in a SQL database, multiple
Mhm.
databases. But once I figured that out and started really thinking, okay, what about when I get these things back? How can I cross-reference all these phone numbers at one time to every piece of evidence we've got, every report we've got in our system, right? Or every call
Mhm.
that's ever come into our like 911 system, because that's where you really get a return, right? Because a phone
Mhm.
number is just a phone number unless you've got names attaching to each of them. So once I understood and I kind of honed in on getting those certs,
Mhm.
I had a good supervisor at the time who basically was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you believe in it this strongly, I will fight IT to get you like access to it. And there
Mm.
was an older gentleman that was over all of our SQL server at the time. And he came out and basically sat next to me and said, okay, for like 30, 45 minutes, show me this. Like do these things without like messing them up and I'll give you access. And so
Mhm.
then the gates opened and I had access to more data. I was a kid in a candy store. I was just so excited. So, which is probably the nerdiest thing I'll say on this episode. But having access to every report and every phone number, every name, every social, everything we've ever put into our system at one time it's pretty powerful. So that's they didn't teach it to me, but they sure tested me on it before they gave me permission and access to it.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point that you made about getting access by IT, because that sometimes can be half the battle. Is you might
I'm
know.
a squeaky wheel.
Yeah,
I squeak
you're right.
until somebody finally says, okay, fine. Like,
yeah, because you might know of a data set, but then getting access to it, and then once you get access to it, getting it all to mesh together so you can do the cross-referencing that you're talking about. That's a whole other
that's
hurdle.
a whole nother can of worms, because we've got multiple places. You get a ticket written to you for speeding. There's a phone number on that. You get a phone call that comes into 911. A phone number's on that, and you have a phone number put in a police report. And if you could believe, they are stored in 3 different formats in these 3 separate databases. So it's never super easy and pretty. Formatting is always a thing, but once you get the hang of all that, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Now, what do you use for SQL?
SSMS.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So then everything able to be brought in through SSMS?
Yeah.
Like all these different things? Yeah.
The majority, yeah. The majority is able to sit there on linked servers without saying too much.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not trying to
I'm gonna get a complaint on talking too much about how our data's set up. And
yeah, I'm not trying to get you into trouble here. Seriously. I always tell my guests I'm not inside edition. I'm not trying to get anybody into trouble here. That's just the way my mind works. So is it at this time when you're getting access to the SQL and all the data, and is this when you feel like you're starting to get analyst work? Or had that already been established? I guess, when did you think you were actually playing analyst, as we're going to play that up?
So funny enough, I never really sat back and said, I might be playing analyst. I realized it whenever I got a call from some people in our planning division at the time, and they said, no, that analyst over there in gang division. And they said, who are you talking about? And they kind of described, and they said, we don't have any analyst that looks like that or goes by that name. And they said, no, I think her name's Brittany. And they said, oh, she's not an analyst. And so when they told me that story, I said, oh, they all think that I'm an analyst. And it's like, no, everybody thought that. I said, oh, I didn't know. I didn't take it as an insult. I was like, well, thank you. I mean, if you consider my work on the level of analyst, then you're welcome.
Yeah.
But I never really thought about it until I actually got called that by somebody.
No, that's interesting. So we're establishing the kind of the analyst mindset. You're getting access to the data, and you're coming at this, it seems, as if you're a detective and you're trying to solve your cases, right?
Right.
And then
that's where that started, yeah.
But once you establish yourself and like, oh, she can do that. Like, I'm imagining that you're getting people coming to you, hey, Brittany, can you do this for me? And you're getting more and more requests to help other people out.
We opened Pandora's box for sure. It definitely became a thing where I don't know that there's not people on our department that are capable of doing that. Maybe they were smarter than I am with keeping their mouth shut, not telling anybody that they could. I don't know. But it definitely became something where nobody had really talked about how you can cross these different siloed data sets, or how you can leverage. One of the common things you do in a case when you're looking at a target or an investigation, whether it be a homicide or robbery, whatever, we're sending subpoenas and search warrants to cell phone companies or data companies like Google or Apple, and when you get that data back, it's basically there's a lot of stuff there, but it doesn't have anything relating to it, right? So who's all related to your target? What all reports has he been in with other criminals? Who has he been arrested with? Who can connect to that data? And being able to do that, not just pull all that data, but then push it into I2 and visualize every phone that you've got an actual identity on in the matter of 10 minutes, while people for years and years and years have been sitting with a ruler and a highlighter going through trying to match up what number they're seeing the most of, or telling them they can do that in Excel really quickly. And it's like these secrets have been held, I guess. I don't know, but it became pretty powerful, especially when people, like I said, were going through with rulers taking days to go through call records from 60 days. And it's like, we can do that in, a matter of 30 minutes with a visual.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what sparked it off, is humans are visual by nature, right?
Now, did you spend a lot of time just getting things the way you like it, so to speak? Meaning that there's data management, there's data processing. This is like, okay, if we're going to do it this way, if we're going to set this thing up, we're going to have to do it so we can streamline it. And so I'm going to have to spend X amount of hours or days or weeks or months getting this the way I want it.
As far as when it was coming in, like people's requests, or the way I'm doing it?
Yeah. The way, as you're establishing with the requests and how you're running things, and
that is still not streamlined. That is still an issue to this day, because my sergeant, my supervisors for my sergeant up, they've all been great, but they can say, you get a request in, forward it to me, because you're getting asked for too much and you've got your own stuff going on. And I'll forward it, and they'll have to come down and say, I don't know what they're talking about. I can't, like, this is too techie for me. Can you translate it to English? And so by the time I've translated it, I'm like, I'll just do it real quick, But it's definitely an issue that we haven't really figured out the workaround on, as far as requests or things of that nature. Yeah. But I'm still trying to figure that out. If you talk to somebody who has a workaround on that, or what they've done that's been successful, please get back to me and let me know.
Yeah. So, well, that's just reminds me. What RMS do you all have?
Currently, we have Tiburon, but
okay,
I believe that's changing next year.
Oh, that's always fun.
And don't tell me about it. The data that's going to be a fun learning curve, is the data migration on that, and where it's at and what's what. So
yeah, I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, how RMS-y is Tiburon for you?
Tiburon's pretty terrible. I know that I shouldn't say that, but it is pretty bad. The data is on the back end is indexed atrociously. We've got, it's just bad. So it can't be, when they say we're going to a new one, it's got to be better than what we're at. So.
Well, hey, you gotta, just talking about squeaky wheels, you need to be on the forefront of being in on those planning meetings.
Yeah, I've missed the first two. I know that's terrible, but there's just so much going on. But I did get voluntold that I would be attending those and talking kind of about our gang database and how we can reference, or how we could make sure that we're inclusive of the data we need to be able to cross-reference easily on that. So.
Yeah. So you're in the gang division. Is the request you're getting from other gang detectives, or are you getting requests from people outside of the division?
Oh, it's department wide. More often than not, it's outside of gang division than it is within. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's all dealing with like this cross-referencing stuff, or what other kind of things are you being asked to do?
So it's a multitude of things. I get that some, and then I've gotten data pools that we're being asked to look at gang data next to how many reports these gang members have been in, how many arrests they've had, things of that nature, where we're having to cross-reference that kind of data that the mayor's office or somebody else wants to look at. And then also we get some cases that come in when they've got like a high profile or a long-term case, or they've hit multiple investigators or have hit like a roadblock, but they've got a lot of evidence or data there. They'll come in sometimes with that and say, here's all the stuff that I've got, and we'll kind of pivot and see if we can see anything different. Doesn't mean that we can, but sometimes when you actually look at what they've got and kind of add in whatever data we can scrape up from the back end, things become really clear, and your picture gets drawn and connections get made and arrests happen after that. So
yeah, but I could find that to be quite cumbersome, right? Because it's not all data that you're dealing with. All the information that they've collected, you have pictures and video and police reports and narratives, and that isn't something that can just be sequeled per se, right?
Yeah, right. So I like the data when it comes to the pictures and the free text data. You're completely right. That's not really something that I drill down on, though. I like my RMS in columns and rows. That's my favorite version of RMS because the narrative is telling, and I do read, obviously, we read all the narratives and supplements that are put into a report, but the data that's connecting on each other for me are people and their identities and phones and addresses and case numbers, things like that, where we can clearly start to see some connections once we start adding in, subpoena data and things of that nature. So that's kind of where I leverage that. And I focus on telling the investigator, if there's something important in all of those 100 scene photos, let me know, right? Or if I hear something or see something within the report that talks about this person gave the passenger this, and they don't ever say the passenger's name or do a person screen on a passenger, and I've got to go back. That's the only time I'm really watching those videos, is if I've got to go back and gather a piece of data that might be relatively important. That's the only time I'm really going back and watching body cam videos or, scene videos and stuff like that.
All right.
But
Well, let's talk about some cases now. So this brings
okay.
us to your analyst badge story. For those that may be new to the show, the analyst badge story is the career-defining case or project that an analyst works, but in your case, that you work. And so it is a serial sexual assault. So let's get into that and just to start from the beginning and tell the story.
So pivoting from what we just talked about, I guess there's kind of two. So like my badge story, my case that I own is going to be a gang RICO case that we've worked. But the rape case that I was able to assist on, like we were talking about this, there was an investigator in special victims that came to me, and they had I believe it was a 7-year serial rape case where they had multiple CODIS hits. It was the same person, but there was no profile in CODIS that was hitting on anybody. And they believed it to be an individual that was in the military or possibly pretending to be in the military, something of that nature. But this investigator had been given the case when she got in, and it was already, I think, 6 years old when she was given it. And I got to give her complete credit, because another thing is being able to say, look, I've hit a roadblock, and like, what else, what am I not seeing, or what am I not doing, right? And so she came over with her entire case file, and she said, I've subpoenaed all of the branches of military. I've like asked for every person that fits this description. I've got all of these sketches that have been done. Here are all our case numbers over the years. And so I basically took everything that she had compiled, all of the stuff that she had looked at, and went back through and pulled all of the data connected to all of the RMS reports. And then I took that list of the people within our city and who got in and around what our suspect description was, height, weight, demographic, everything of that nature, and said, okay, give me every vehicle that's related to the households of these people. Because we had we had I think a 2 or 3 character partial that they thought it could be a car like this, and this sexual assault that happened a year prior. And so I'd taken that, and then I pulled everything connected to those individuals, and then I start getting links and links after links to this vehicle where I'm looking at, okay, that matches the same type of vehicle, same color, same everything. And then when he's on one of these reserve lists in the city, and I pull up his picture, and I'm like, that's him. That's 100% him. So I call her, and she must have screamed at a decibel that I had heard. I called her the next day, and I said, hey, I think I've got your guy. And she just started screaming. She said, no, you don't. No, you don't. And I said, come over here. She's like, no, I'm already in the car. I'm on my way. And so it was super exciting just to see, like, look, that was all your stuff. I'm just throwing it all into I2. We're looking at where the data is crossing each other and pulling everything off of a couple other databases to look at what's connected. And it's smack dab in the middle where all the lines connect, like a big gleaming star. That's your guy, And it was. So they end up ends up going and talking to her supervisors and going to the DA, and they expedite the DNA, and it's a hit, and he gets charged with, I believe, 7 based off of their ability to locate and contact complainants. So it was a win for sure.
Now, so the vehicle data is that based on like car stops and parking tickets, or do you have access to the DMV?
It's not DMV, so it's more of clear Thompson routers and TLO and things of that nature, where you can pull. Yeah, so it's stuff that's registrations of vehicles to households. So,
well, you must have your I2 information pretty well organized, though, because if it's even off like a character, it's not going to draw a link.
yeah, there's a lot of formatting so that the anybody who works in I2
Mm-hmm.
efficiently or effectively knows that the importance of being able to make sure that your data is formatted consistently is
Mm-hmm.
huge, right? Like, so that was the big thing for me, is looking at license plates typically have a particular format if they're a hard license plate, which this we were lucky this was, because your paper plates in the state of Texas are quite different, but your license plates will start with those letters, which is what we
Mm-hmm.
had. So I made my formatting on license plates.
Mm-hmm.
My identities were stuck on those first letters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would eliminate my matches if I realized that they were nowhere near, but we ended up hitting based off of those letters. So, and based off of the vehicle type too. So yeah, there's a lot of cleaning before I push it into I2 for sure. Phone
No,
numbers too, and people too. Yeah.
no, that was, I mean, I haven't messed around with it for 15, 20
Yeah.
years now, but I do remember that was my frustration with it, is just, man, not only did you have all that different access to information, you also had to have it all in the same format. And you got
Right.
you have multiple levels, right? If you're talking about a person, for instance, you have phone number, you have address, you
Mhm.
have any affiliations, there's all those different aspects that you could get a hit off of, right?
Right.
And so, and all those almost have to be its own separate icon, and it just
So
can
that's
get,
kind of what I went with on that case, is I made
yeah.
those separate icons because I wanted to see, okay, these vehicles are registered to this house versus the other. So it's definitely throwing a lot at the wall and then deleting from there, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, eliminating from that and kind of
Mm-hmm.
seeing, starting out with my hard set of, if this is a military like individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had multiple accounts that it is. And so starting there and then just eliminating from what doesn't fit off of that was kind of where my starting was. Luckily, this individual had a vehicle that was registered to a close family member that lived in the house with him. So
All right. So it
there's
wasn't even
multiple
a,
lines
if,
connecting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even registered to him, right?
No, it
So
was
you
not
did an
registered to him.
address. Yeah. So yeah. So this is nerdo me question. Like, do you remember how many records you were putting in I2 initially, like before you started whittling down and taking stuff out?
Oh dear. It was a lot. It looks,
Yeah.
I typically, like I said, I throw a lot at the wall and then I
Mm-hmm.
drill down from there and delete from there, because I'd
Mm-hmm.
rather just get rid of it after I put it in than
Mm-hmm.
be missing it all together, and then I'm looking for something that's not there. My sergeant and others will walk in the office sometimes and they'll look at my I2 that'll be up and it's just like, that looks crazy. I don't know what you're doing. It looks like spider webs all over.
Yeah, and there's probably always that one detective that will come in and then pretend that he or she knows what it says and just will make something up, because that was always the case.
Yes, 100%. It's like, wow, well, I don't even know what it says yet. So like, that's impressive.
As you go through and you're investigating and you're trying to put all the different pieces together and trying to fill in the gaps, you certainly could want certain data sets, and it sure would be nice to have this type of thoughts. But then with you have those, but then you're also get in and saying, hey, well, I'm going to get there, but I have to deal with data management and data processing and
Right.
work and all that. And I think that's where you bring that extra to the table, right? And so it is a fascinating mindset that you have here.
Thank you.
So, all right. Well, no, that's always a good win right there, as something that
Hmm.
was a 7-year-old investigation, and that was something that you were able to help solve that case and get a dangerous person off the streets.
Yeah. Data's powerful, right?
Yeah,
Data is
yeah.
evidence, evidence is data. So,
Hey, this is Freddie Croft, Lieutenant with HPD. My public service announcement is to encourage people to get a T model of skill acquisition. Learn a broad set of skills across many different things, and then find one that interests you and dive deep into that. Learn and become a subject matter expert in it. doing that will allow you to be extremely successful in your career.
Hello, I'm Barry Fosberg, the senior analyst with Houston Police Department. I'm here to do a PSA for regional associations. If you're an IACA or familiar with IACA, get in, find out if you have a local association, and if for no other reason your crooks don't know you have borders, your borders typically have other crime analysts, and this is a great way to know them by name.
My name is Shannon Kail. Please stop clipping your fingernails in the office. The sound is annoying, and no one wants a fingernail to come flying into their workspace. Keep the grooming routine in your home. Keep the workspace clean and free of fingernail debris. Thank you. I approve this message.
All right. You mentioned before, let's talk about the case that you're working now. I know it's a little bit of active investigation, so I know we're only going to be able to go so far, but I do want to touch on it.
Yeah, we're currently working on a RICO, which is a racketeering case, which is a federal case. It's been going on 3 years now, just getting everything compiled because we've got 21 targets that are connected to a violent street gang and a little over 128 cases last that we looked at that we had to pull in everything from. So that originally started with about 51 cases that were violent robberies, aggravated robberies with a firearm, and like same thing we've been talking about. I pulled every case number that was consistent with that type of robbery and that I believed was going to have a connection because it was a new and upcoming type of crime type of robbery they were committing, following people off from one of our really affluent areas and targeting those that had very expensive watches or very on.
Okay.
So basically, the first that we were seeing it, and we had linked it to this gang that I was familiar with and had been working on, and pulling in those 51 cases and every piece of information that we had in our reporting system that connected to those, and then seeing where my vehicles matched up and where my suspects matched up, pulling those in. I ended up with I think I have it's 7 feet now. It's up on the wall. It's 7 feet long, this chart that's all like color coded with, people and vehicles and all of that. But that's all where it started. And then we've just evolved from there, talking to the federal. A lot have been arrested on state charges, but pulling it into a giant racketeering case is where we're going to get the most out of it, where they're doing serious time and not getting out in a year, because that's kind of what it's been the culture here in Harris County lately.
So you're doing the analytical work and you're doing the data management work. I mean, when do you have time to actually do the investigative work, leaving the office and talking to people and all that aspects of investigation?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of overtime and a lot of locking my door and putting signs on. I have a good sergeant who puts signs on the door that basically says, if you need her for anything, contact me or come talk to me, because there's times that we have crunches. I'm just like, I have to get this done, and it's a revolving door of people just being, not that I'm more than willing to help people, but at some point it's like I've got a few things I got to get taken care of on my stuff. So it's been exhausting. So overtime is kind of my answer.
Yeah. So with the RICO case, then you talk about the victims that they're targeting. Is there other aspects to the crime other than robbery? Is drugs involved? Is territory involved? Is other violence to other gang members involved?
Right. Yeah. So interesting you say that. So the cases that got us started, the complainants in those, and we start digging into the people that we connect and the suspects that we know are committing these crimes, and they get arrested, and we start dumping phones, pulling all of these different aspects in, and we know them to be violent gang members that are very territorial over a space in South Houston and warring with another gang. And so once you start getting the federal prosecution into it, you have to pull everything that connects to that individual. So if they're going to be a target, we have to pull every case that they connect to. And that's when you start seeing the shootings where they've targeted another gang member, or they were a suspect in this case. And you really see the amount of crime in cases, not just on these particular type of robberies, but the impact overall that one of these targets is having on the city. There's definitely, they do not specialize in just doing one type of robbery. They definitely do shootings against other gang members. There's drug involvement, drug trafficking, all of the stuff that comes along with your good gang members.
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
interesting. So if they're targeting certain individuals with jewelry, sometimes you run into a situation where you get something that's too expensive that you can't get rid of it, right? Or it's going to be something that is so high end that people are going to realize that it's stolen, that no pawn shop or however they're dealing with it aren't going to take it.
When your good fences come in. So yeah, without going too far down that road, fences have been a big thing and definitely have come into play in this federal prosecution. So yeah, there's always somebody that's willing to buy something that's worth 60 grand for $4 grand,
Yeah. So if you said it, I missed it. I'm sorry. How long have you been working on this?
3 years on the federal side of it. So
wow.
Well, yeah, almost 3.
Yeah.
It's been every time we think that we're just right there, it's become, well, we need all of this. So working up each person, the main issue is really that it's just been me and then, my partner I guess, the person who sits in my space, if you want to consider it partners, that's what we say, because she's right there with me all the time, but she's technically my analyst, but we work really well together, but it's just been the two of us on this case for so long. So it's a lot, but we're chugging along because they're worth it. So
yeah. And what's her name?
Megan Stepp.
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah,
I guess
fantastic.
And then what's next for the case? I mean, you're obviously going towards that. How much longer do you got?
So we're looking at indictments this summer. So not much longer. I'm right there. It's been a long road.
Yeah. So, and then all along the way, I can imagine that you're thinking about how the next time you do this, of how you're going to improve the data sets and then improve the data processing and everything else.
There's definitely been we need to do this in the future going forward. So there's been a lot of learning curves that we've kind of worked around and figured out, hey, if we would have just done this from the beginning, that would have been smarter. But I mean, pulling in everything and then mapping everything. So we had ankle monitor data, cell phone location data, mapping all of that and seeing where they're hitting, looking at your cases and what crimes are they actually present on based off of your time and your space. So 21 different targets, all with hundreds of thousands of points, has been fun to say the least.
Yeah, there's over doing this podcast, there's 2 data sets that I laugh at every time. The one is ankle monitoring, because by definition that's what it is, and yet you still get people hanging out with people that they know they have the monitor on, and they're committing crimes with
them on. It's fantastic.
And the second one is jail calls.
That's also fantastic. Yeah. It is. It's beautiful because every call, obviously, at the beginning of it, they state that you're being recorded.
Yes. But, and I forgot to mention that in the beginning of this. Anthony Bush, who I had on the show, and he talked about jail calls too. So he was the one that actually recommended you for this show. So I forgot to mention that in your intro. So. All right. Well, good deal. Let's move on then. I do want to talk a little bit. Obviously, you are a hybrid, all right? So I think we've established that. So I do want to get a little bit into a conversation about the gap between sworn and civilian, or investigator and analyst, and how you've obviously blurred that line and it can easily work with either side.
I think that I don't know why the gap exists. I think that sometimes there's a bit of a communication gap in what, like I said earlier, my sergeant getting these requests and saying, I don't even know what they're talking about. So a lot of times they'll ask for an investigator or detective or anybody will ask for, I need everything connected to this house. And an analyst looking at that, I always tell them, if they're asking for everything connected to the house, they're asking for all of the people, all of how those people are connected, all of the vehicles, what phones come back to like things at that house, how many cases how many times have police shown up there, all those kind of things, right? That we can find and dig up on it. And it's like some of the analysts would tell me, well, when he said, I need to know who comes back to this house, they literally pull who came back to the house. So like it's registered, like the house is listed under such and such in like our CAD system or our appraisal district records. And that they're like, well, they didn't tell me all that. And so talking to the investigator and saying, hey, look, if you need a full workup on the house, that's kind of how you need to word it. But if you also tell them what you're working, it makes your analyst more invested in and helping you get there, right? If you're just saying, I need this one piece and they're not involved in like your process, it's hard to work on something without knowing what's going on around it, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because, I mean, they're looking for leads, right? They're looking for
exactly.
how to move forward, what string to pull. There's thousands of strings.
How does this connect? Yeah. And
yeah.
if you only give them one location, but you're really in actuality trying to connect 3 different locations and these other crimes, like they may be able to make that connection for you. Like I think we had Anthony had a intern that they had brought by, and she was really excited and eager to get like started in like the crime analysis profession, getting out of college. And she told me that she was getting to work with an investigator on this hit and run case, and that she had worked up what the vehicle was like, and they thought it was a drunk, and they ended up failure to stop and render aid, and it ended up the person was deceased. Well, she develops and finds license plates and finds a vehicle with damage right where they said that this individual hit this pedestrian, finds literally LPR images of the vehicle matching that.
Nice.
Finds the person who's been arrested multiple times for DWI. And she's like, so I gave it to the investigator, and he says, oh, that's an okay lead. I'll look at it. And I'm like, no, you solved his case. Like it's not a lead. That is a case like closed. Like you can go to the DA, and she's like, well, I mean, he said, I was like, but it's not. Like it's the same thing. As a detective, I'm telling you, like you solved that. And so getting people invested, people want to know that what they're doing matters and how it's affecting the bigger picture, and just asking for random little pieces of data isn't really involving or incorporating, your analyst to your team. So
but no, and I think too, without the LPR, it would have been difficult, right? And because I think with analysts, it's assumed, and maybe even in some departments, it's frowned on to leave the office. I think for most analysts, like they're not going to go out and investigate that. It's not like they're going to go around the neighborhood if they think there's a house. They know where the house is to try to start taking pictures of a car that's parked on the street, right? That's not normally what is asked of an analyst. I mean, as an investigator, right, you do that. You can easily do that. But in normal cases, if you didn't have that extra bit of knowledge, either a surveillance camera or some additional information, you would have nothing really to go into. But it's a good point that I like the distinction. It's like, no, you didn't help the case, you solved the case.
Exactly. I mean, if you were to give him, if she didn't have LPR data per se, like she gave him a list of vehicles that matched that description, and he was going to go out and try to get eyes on these different vehicles to see if they matched, I could go there. But once you've lined up all of those components, it's pretty, not only that, but that the vehicle had scanned in that area. I think it was that day or the day before. So we know that vehicle's in the area. Now it's all of a sudden it's got damage consistent on recent LPRs. That's a case closed. It's done. So
I think too, with analysts, the more access you can get to different data sets, the better. And I think you obviously know that. And when I was talking with Anthony, I mean, the fact that he was going over jail calls and was pulling great intel from there is just not that the investigator can't do that, but the fact that you're helping out the investigation by doing that, so the other detectives or investigator can be tracking down another lead.
Right, 100%. It's and I've told Anthony when he first talked about the case that I think he discussed on your show that was stolen. He was discussing before he presented that case, and I said, no, that's going to be a phenomenal case. I said the cool thing about phone calls, like toll records or jail calls is that you can measure when we talk about like social network analysis and like looking at a network and how it's made up and who's more important in the network versus others. You can measure based off of how many times somebody calls or how long somebody talks to somebody, who's more important to that person versus others, right? You know, who's closest to that person based off of the amount of communication they have with them. And so measuring out those connections and seeing how connected these people actually were. It wasn't just one random phone call, it was multiple calls for 20 minutes at a time, you know, really kind of changed the way that you look at call records in general. So very cool case that he had, and using jail records to build that up was phenomenal.
But he got his stolen. You didn't get yours stolen. That's what
No,
you can
but
hold
yeah.
that over his, you can hold that over his head.
But I've learned the hard way, working with the entity, he who shall not be named, FBI, that you don't take certain things to them for certain reasons. It is what it is. And I tried to warn him, but he said he's learned the hard way. So
Yeah. So I guess that you have the communication aspect between analyst and an investigator, and I think a lot of people advice on this show for analysts is to always get out there, sell yourself, let be known what you can do, and good things will happen. But I guess on the investigator side, because I don't get to talk about the investigator's view too often on this show, so I'm interested to get the investigator's take of that relationship between investigator and analyst. What advice do you have for investigators?
I honestly, and put your analyst on your team. I mean, if you work with other investigators or detectives on a case, or you're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks and just brainstorming on possible leads and possible suspects, put your analyst at the table in that meeting, bring them in, invest them in the case, because if they've got the time to dig through this data that you don't really even know is there, they could really make your case. I mean, they can help solve your case. But going to them randomly with one question on one location is not really, it's not investing them, and it's not incorporating them into the case fully. So I think that our success really is on just being a team as a whole. I mean, our analyst is in all of our meetings when we're meeting with prosecutors and we're talking about, you know, how things are related to one another. She's sitting at the table with us too, because she's just as involved in the case as the investigators are. So aside from I know that there's a lot of jobs that what I am lucky on is that I never get asked to do some of the things that our crime analysis gets asked to do, which is make those real pretty pictures of crime, or those heat maps that don't really tell you much about what's going on. They just tell you, hey, it's hot over here. It's like, well, we knew that, right? So they get asked some of that stuff, but the ones that you've got sitting in your division, in your investigative division, bring them in on your cases as much as possible, because it's going to pay dividends, like in the long run, massive. Invest in them and let them in on what you're working, because they'll invest in your case at that point.
Yeah, and share with everybody, right?
That's another thing. It's like, if you're coming to somebody, and I say this too, it's the more, if I'm going to help with something, it's like, and you're telling me you're hitting a roadblock, I want to be able for you to tell me, okay, we turned onto this street, and then tell me what all the houses and trees and sidewalks look like when you hit that roadblock. Because if I don't know what anything looks like around me, how am I going to help you over that? Like, if you don't tell them what everything looks like up into that roadblock, it's much harder to get over that without reworking your entire case. So
all right, how about return on investment? What should someone study today, because 5 years from now it's going to be important?
As nerdy as it sounds, data structuring, how data is stored, and how it can, once you understand, and really, that's one thing that I was saying isn't changing in 5 years. I think tech evolves so quickly and becomes, there's a new tool or a new trick or of the trade every 6 months. It seems there's something brand new out there, and brand new way to find people and find information and all of that. I think that the one thing that's consistent is how we're structuring and manipulating data. So I got Excel to begin with, and then SQL. Any way for you to know how data is stored and structured is going to be huge 5 years from now still.
All right, good.
So,
and you're also an instructor, and
I
the other hats that you wear. So Shadowfall training. What I am not familiar with that. What's Shadowfall training?
It's a training and consulting company. So I was doing a lot of training just from, I guess, commanders and people sending individuals just to come and shadow me for a day or sit with
Mm-hmm.
me for a day. And so it evolved out of just wanting to share knowledge versus silo it and hoard it and
Mm-hmm.
not tell anybody of how you're doing what you're doing. We could really be the force multiplier. So I enjoy teaching. I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
training people and helping them learn new tools. And my favorite is when people are investing in themselves, obviously. Like nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to take the training they're being required or mandated to take, right? But if you really are passionate and want to evolve and want to learn and are investing in yourself in that training, it's truly, truly rewarding to be able to help people understand things that they didn't know existed or learn how to work things. So
Yeah. Now, do they actually have a class on just the intel methods for cross-referencing? Is there an actual class?
So the Intel methods and techniques class that I've I taught one in December. I'm going to be teaching another one in June, and I've got
Mm-hmm.
one coming up this coming week out at a smaller agency that's hosting here in Katy, outside of Houston. That's on data sources and then data
Mm-hmm.
structuring. So basically how to get this information, how to scrape it, how to find it from all sorts of different sites, and then how to compile that in a way that's going to be useful,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in Excel, and then
Mm-hmm.
evolving from there, formatting that and teaching investigators and analysts. So it's kind of my classes are set up and structured for, I guess, kind of the way that I work. So investigators and analysts alike, it's beneficial to both because those lines are pretty grayed out in my world over here. So that's the main one that everyone wants to take, I think, is based off of what can I find and how can I find it? How can I make myself better at finding information on people?
Yeah.
So that's what that is.
Oh, that's really good. So, and we'll put more information in the show notes, obviously, for that training and maybe future trainings or ones that you're aware of that are similar
Fantastic.
for the listener. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's finish up with personal interest then. And big surprise, you're a gamer.
I love video games. Not the really cool, trendy stuff for the most part. I like more of the nerdy and obscure games, but yeah, that's kind of what I do on my downtime, I guess.
Sorry. So, but I guess you got to explain this a little bit. So
Okay.
it's not, so you're not talking about fighting games. You're not talking about sports games. You're
Yeah,
talking
no
about,
sports games at all. I don't play Call of Duty. I have played in the past, but I do not play. I don't want to be cursed at by a 13-year-old. So I stay away from all of those. My husband does play a lot. He doesn't play the sports games either, but
Mhm,
he plays those. I play more platformers,
mhm.
Metroidvanias, like the indie games, that the nerdy stuff, I guess.
Yeah. And is that what you're playing now?
Yeah, I'm actually finishing up Psychonauts 2, which is a platformer and a platformer puzzler. That's really what we do. We solve puzzles for a living. So I mean,
Yeah.
it would just
Yeah.
go along with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it keeps your mind sharp, right?
Yes,
Yeah. And
or
you
helps you
do.
escape your mind, one or the other. I don't know.
Yeah. But you did mention a story yesterday in the prep call about Mortal Kombat 2016.
Yes, I did that. Yeah, that is funny. So, talking about growing up in this nerdy realm of playing video games and being told to go outside because we'd been playing for too long, Mortal Kombat was a big thing, right? And then even going to arcades, and it was there too, along with Street Fighter and everything else. But when it came back out and they re-released it, I put in the book and I was off for an entire day so that I could play after I waited up to get it at GameStop because you were still getting games on hard copy, I guess. But
Mm-hmm.
yep,
Yeah.
nerd
So,
story of the day.
so you missed work so you could play Mortal Kombat 2016.
I did, but in fairness, my husband actually he missed too. So he had taken off. We weren't together at the time. He said that he took off too just to play all day. So
Oh
he's
man.
just as nerdy as I am, as much as he'd probably deny it.
All right, very good. Well, our last segment of the show is Words to the World. This is where you can promote any idea that you wish. Brittany, what are your words to the world?
I think my words to the world are invest in yourself. You know, push yourself, and nobody's going to know what you're capable of better than you are. So push yourself to learn and to evolve, and don't stay stagnant, because there's always things you can learn from everybody. And I think that we too often get complacent, and I just invest in you. Yeah. Keep growing, keep evolving.
Very good. Well, I leave every guest with you giving me just enough to talk bad about you later. But I do appreciate you being on the show, Brittany. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
You too.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.